webinar hosted by Seek and Andy Starnes of Insight Fire Training. We have Andy here, who brings over 30 years of experience from his career as a battalion chief in Charlotte, North Carolina. So Andy, thanks for being here with us today to talk about techniques for locating the fire faster and more effectively using thermal imaging cameras. So if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please just type them in the chat and we will do our best to answer them in a timely manner. And with that being said, I hope everyone enjoys, and Andy, take it away.
Thank you, Jordan. So we're going to talk about an interesting topic today that may not seem very invigorating to some, but we're going to enlighten you with some information that you may or may not be aware of when attempting to locate the fire. Here's the first thing we have to discuss. This is a deadly problem in the fire service. It's kind of like the elephant in the room no one wants to talk about. When you start looking at the data behind this, one of the most common problems, phrases, and statistics that's repeated over and over again in Maydays and NIOSH reports is firefighters being unaware of the actual fire's location or surprised by being above them, below them, or in areas they weren't sure of where it was. And I've got some statements for you to review statistically that we found as doing research on this particular project. Some of this I was aware of and some of it I was not. So for me, it's a great learning opportunity to go over old data and new data. One of the statements you hear is we have not found the seat of the fire being the location of the fire. That occurred in 67% of Mayday incidents. That could lead to them going too far, too deep, being above or below it. Statements like it's getting really hot in here were said in 44% of Mayday incidents. Think about that when you're wearing 3 layers of protective turnout gear plus an SCBA, your gear is saturated at the point. Where are you if those statements are being made? You're in the flow path, or as NIOSH says, between the fire and the ventilation point. It's not a good place to be without a hose line, which means you shouldn't hang out there very long. And then zero visibility conditions reported in 59% of all Mayday incidents. High heat often accompanied those conditions. Dense smoke, reduced visibility is 0, making it nearly impossible for firefighters to find the fire or their way out. Or is it impossible? That's a question we should ask. So if we review some data, some current data, because I like to update data. This is from our good friends at the Firefighter Mayday Survey from Basil Ibrahim and the great people running that. This is from the first 100 Maydays that they studied. A little over 10% of the Maydays, those firefighters stated they were overrun or cut off by fire. Now, how can you be overrun or cut off by fire unless you don't know that 3-letter acronym that's taught in Size Up? Where's the fire been? Where's it at? And where it's going? The BAG acronym that you hear people talk about. That is critical for firefighters to know during the Size Up process. And Size Up just isn't just the exterior. It's an ongoing evaluation of incident priorities from start to finish, exterior, interior, all the way to the end, and then talking about it back at the station. And 65%, over 65% of the Maydays in this study, the firefighter in distress was assigned to fire attack. Think about that. They're on a hose line, they're supposed to be attacking the fire, and they end up in a Mayday scenario. How does that happen? We're going to talk about that. And then upon initial contact during the Mayday, the firefighter in distress, 34% of them reported 0 visibility, 31% reported low visibility. It's going to get more enlightening about the fact that they can't see. The fact that 88% of the rapid intervention teams had access to a thermal imaging camera, but only 34% reported using that device. Now, if the firefighter in distress is in the same boat, theoretically, if they have 1 thermal imaging camera per truck, per engine, where is that camera typically mounted? And then who has access to it? Typically the company officer. So if 65% of them was assigned to fire attack, if this person's on the nozzle or second person back, they may not even have a thermal imaging camera. That would basically coincide with why they were overrun or cut off by fire. And this survey can be reviewed on this QR code that we put in here, because I highly recommend you review data, not my opinion. I live by my father's statement, best chart wins. Go review current data, compare it to old data, and you'll notice this survey lines up with people like Project Mayday, the Firefighter Disorientation Study, And then when you read NIOSH reports, you'll notice the same consistent statistics repeated from 20 years ago to today. This I thought was very enlightening. This is also part of Don Abbott's work, 25 common phrases repeated before Mayday. He lists 16 common red flag phrases in Mayday incidents in the firefighter Mayday survey. Now, if you look at the top 3, there's zero visibility, there's fire above our heads, or there's fire below us. That's over 70 out of the 100 reported that occurring. Can't see, fire above us, or fire below us. Now, if you can't see, you can't feel, and you can't hear because your heart rate's elevated, core temperature's elevated, and we're not using a thermal imaging camera, how are we to be successful in our fire attack scenarios when we can't even know where the fire is, where it's going? Is our hose line being effective? Are we flowing enough water? Are we flowing it in the right direction? There are many other phrases in here that are very important, but those top 3 really hit home because that's, if you read the disorientation study and Project Mayday and add this to it, they're all saying the same thing from 20 years ago to today, which means the definition of insanity. We are doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. When this is 5 seconds apart, you wonder why firefighters are surprised, because less than 1% of the students that we train have any thermal imaging training whatsoever, and very few have had any live fire training. This picture on the left is in a flashover container 5 seconds before it turns to the picture on the right. And for those of you who pay a lot of attention, the reason why that temperature bar says 650 degrees, that's in Celsius, just so you know. So if somebody asks, all attack pros are 0 to 1025 or 0 to 1200 if you're in the VRS, but we were playing with a lot of European stuff, so we had to be culturally diverse and make sure we had it in Celsius. Because, you know, my friends overseas say Celsius is best. I'm not gonna argue with them, but 5 seconds apart, quickly it changed from, oh, I don't see any color, to boom, rapid fire progression. So you'll hear me say this, I'm gonna echo it again. The absence of color is not the absence of heat. So before we go further into this problem, remember a quick review of a few things for us. Your fire service tick is not a thermometer. It provides apparent temperatures. Do not look at the spot temperature. That's why it's been removed per NFPA 1801, the 2021 standard. Unless you're in TI Basic Plus or you're using a non-NFPA approved camera, will you see that spot temperature in the bottom right-hand corner. These cameras can be hundreds of degrees off in actual measurement, and they don't read anything but surface temperatures and the temperature across that background. They don't read smoke temperatures accurately. They don't read gas temperatures at all, which is a big misnomer, and shiny surfaces can cause issues. And be aware that moving gray or white convection currents are hot, extremely hot. The absence of color is not the absence of heat. You got to know when your camera shows color, or any camera, when it shows color and why, and how flowing water being at certain angles or certain distance can affect showing color as well. That's a mouthful, but that all comes down to training and education, which is why we offer our very simple 10 tips for thermal imaging success. It's online, it's free. You can go on there. We have 2 of these through Seek Thermal, and we're going to focus on points 7, 8, and 10 today. How we interpret or read the language of heat, how we use additional features when we're struggling to locate the fire, and how we use this tactically to make a difference on the fire ground for the people we serve, for saving their property, and for our own firefighters and families. And it should be listed in that order. But these are 10 very simplistic tips that delve into that. You can review it on our YouTube channel. The QR code is in the bottom right-hand corner there. And if you want to know what tips will or will not do, please first watch Thermal Imaging 101, that talks about what am I actually seeing, what does it detect, and more importantly, what does it not do, and when does it not work well, which is something you should explain to every firefighter, because if you don't, they'll try to use it in an incorrect way anyway. So let's talk about interpreting thermal data. Things you need to be aware of that will help you. I need the fire service to put TikTok away, stop watching funny memes and videos, and start watching tick videos when they're sitting around of their brand and model of camera, and learn to interpret the following things. What does a non-uniform heat signature look like? This includes the words thermal bridging. In other words, what is an anomaly or a heat signature that is in your field of view that should not be there, like a heat signature around the top of a door frame, window, heat coming through a floor register, through the wall, knee walls, anything that's showing you an abnormal heat signature that is outside of ambient, indicating a fire. A low sensitivity indicator would be also something you look for in dual gain ticks. Seek is a mixed gain tick, so you wouldn't see that, but a low sensitivity indicator in a FLIR, MSA, Draeger, Bullard, Leader, or Argus all have a green triangle that shows up in the upper left-hand corner of the display when a certain percentage of the pixels hits a certain amount of heat, trying to warn you if that triangle points up, your butt should be down and water should be flowing. You got to learn yours and when it appears and why. And what does convection currents look like? How do I identify them? How does that help me as a firefighter, as an incident commander, as a company officer? How do I identify something called a thermal layer? What does it mean based on its height and location and descending? And then what are colorization of superheated areas look like? And what does that indicate? How does that help you? This is the language of heat we're going to talk about. And this is all referenced in NFPA 1408 in Chapter 7. It tells you that you shall be able to interpret the colors displayed, temperatures and temperature ranges associated with those colors that are specific to the thermal imager being used. In other words, you've got to learn your camera, your TI, your TIC, your thermal imager, whatever we're going to call it this week, because it seems to be a point of contention on what we call it. We like to change the words every few years. I don't know if y'all figured that out, because we get bored evidently and want to have a different acronym. But Chapter 7, NFPA 1408, check it out. 23 different topics it talks about you should be trained in. Review it. If you don't want to go too deep, just read Chapter 7. But there's a lot of information in that standard, which is going to change to NFPA 1400 in the next year or two. But make sure you're aware of it and what's required of you. So let's talk about locating the fire, some tips and tricks. Here's your Cliff Notes, one page. Hey, this is what Andy's going to talk about, and this is all I got to remember, because that's everybody who wants to know that, right? They want to train a trainer in 8 minutes or 8 hours. They don't want to sit here all week. So here's some things I'd recommend that would help you immensely on the fire ground. When you're doing size up, you got to read the building, read the smoke, and this last point is left out. Use the thermal imaging camera to read heat signatures, exterior heat signatures, signatures coming from the building, convection currents. Where's the hottest part of the building? Where's the coldest part of the building? And that size up leads into an entry scan. Wherever your point of entry is for fire attack, search, or whatever your assignment may be, this is the most rushed and improperly done scan ever. We see them where firefighters pick up the tick, they point it straight ahead, don't move. They swing it like a baseball bat or like they're swinging a fly swatter trying to hit a bee. It is erratic, erroneous, and doesn't gain them any data whatsoever. So learning how to scan properly from low to high, slow and smooth, below the smoke layer, and inside the actual doorway, not from outside, as we talk about, Thomas Anderson talks about our 4 points of scanning, it has incredible value because now we've already done our outside scan and we're doing our inside scan to tell us, as John Lightly says, to confirm or contradict what we think we know. Where is the fire? Where is the layout of the structure? Where is the areas I'd want to search? Where is the fire going based on those conditions? All interpreted through what we call the language of heat. There's a great article by Tom Zend I read years ago, and I love that phrase, the language of heat. We will focus on these things through this webinar. Convection, it equals direction. Which way is the fire going? And also the severity of it, the height and speed. The thermal layer height lowers as it nears the fire source, which is pretty common knowledge. But what does it look like to your TIC, your thermal imager? And then colorization can provide, or guess what? It can hide information. Certain cameras, too much color blocks out information. Needs to be a healthy balance between grayscale and color. If you read NFPA 1801, it says TI basic shall be black, gray, white, yellow, orange, red, with no more than 50% of the overall temperature range being grayscale. In other words, if you have a 1,000-degree temperature range, then only up to 500 of it can be gray per NFPA. So you have to have a balance between discernible details in grayscale and colorization for heat or rapid fire progression or identification of superheated areas. And the last one is thermal bridging. Those things I talked about, non-uniform heat signatures, that is a fancy word for conduction, an interior heat signature transferring to an exterior heat signature. And if you think about it as a bridge connects two areas as a point of transfer or way to from one point to another. A thermal bridge is an area of weakness within a structure that allows heat transfer or a heat bridge to transfer from the interior to the exterior, showing you an anomaly of where the fire is. And most firefighters dismiss it because it's in gray or white. That is a problem. That is your tips to start with. Now, if we're doing a size up, I'm sure that the majority of you have been on a long time, are very familiar with how to do a size up, what it should consist of, and we're not saying throw away any of your fundamental knowledge. But however, you need to think about this. From 1998 to 2017, fundamental knowledge has caused firefighters to miss 24 below grade fires that resulted in 32 firefighter fatalities. We missed the basement 32 times. It resulted in 32 deaths and 19 serious injuries. Now, you may look at that and say, well, that's not that many over that time span. Well, if I yank you out of your family's life, I'm sure that means a lot to them, especially if we could simply identify that it has a basement and the fire was in the basement. And in 33% of all Maydays, a 360-degree survey or size up was not completed for whatever reason, many variables. So to summarize that, locating the fire during size up and then confirming this data on your initial entry scan are two of the most important scans a firefighter can accomplish with a TIC. And if you want to know why, because you're not promised a good environment as soon as you move in 2 to 3 meters or 6 to 10 feet into a building. Conditions can change due to smoke and moisture, where using a thermal imaging camera can be very difficult, very frustrating, and firefighters cannot interpret the data very well. So during a size up and initial entry scan, we have good conditions. We have a good air intake. We can keep the camera out of the environment and stay low and get a good sense of where those problems are, where the fire is and our searchable spaces. This is why size up with a TIC is critically important. And size up is beginning to end, from the outside to the inside, all the way to the seat of the fire, which is what we're talking about today. And if you watch this video from John Lightly, this is a house fire with a basement. Now you're going to see the same shot 3 times before he walks up, and ask yourself, would you capture this in your mind as a fast walking battalion chief with a thermal imaging camera? Would you immediately recognize this is a basement fire? Here's the first look as he picks up the TIC and looks. Those were 2 basement windows lit up white hot on a cool day. Same view again, slowed down just slightly. Once we get the firefighter footage video, there's his feet. There is those 2 windows with that non-uniform glowing heat signature on single pane glass, which is unusual. And then here's our entry point, and we have a colorized window to the right. We have some thermal bridging over a little bit further showing through the wall. We have a convection current pattern. We have a spigot or water connection there that's lit up. And then we see a firefighter at the top of the stairs with heat coming over his head, convection currents. This is a basement fire. Did that take that long to figure that out? No. And that's only looking at 2 sides of the structure. We need to see the whole thing. Now, how does this help us with our window of opportunity? Many times firefighters do not look at windows because they were taught TICs cannot see through glass. Here's your simple rules of window thermography, because there is an entire field of inspecting windows with thermal imaging cameras, but they don't use fire service cameras, just so you know. The pictures here are 2 different cameras looking at the same basement window in Ohio, and that is a fire in the basement. This is an example of what's known as thermal bridging on single pane glass. Single pane glass does not stop infrared energy from going through. However, double pane glass can show signs of heat around the frame, and in many cases a halo effect or an uneven pattern on the glass itself when that inert gas fails. Another thing that I didn't learn until recently in window inspections and fires is in a double pane glass under fire conditions, 2 things can occur that may interest you. Number one, the inner pane can fail, and you start to see this movement on the glass through the eyes of the thermal imaging camera. That tells you the inner pane has failed, which is significant because it takes a lot of heat to do that. Another thing that can happen on your cheap vinyl windows that I have in my house here is the actual upper sash can fail. The mechanisms that hold that up can fail, and that sash will actually drop, and then you'll self-limit. I've seen that on training fire. Pretty interesting. So that failed before the glass did. All visible through the thermal imaging camera, giving me indications of heat. Because if I look at that 4-inch or 6-inch thick wall, the windows or the openings are areas I would look at first. And this is an example of reading the heat in our training we did in Delaware State Fire School. want you to see a couple of things in here. One, convection. Two, this is a full exhaust because the fire is beneath us. You'll see heat coming through the floor, and you'll see a V pattern. But what I really want you to hone in on is why firefighters miss this, and a couple of things we did wrong. This is all in grayscale to start with. Here we go. Convection currents. How many of you would guess right off the top that this is all the way to the floor, a full exhaust, until you look left and go, ooh, that's fire coming through the floor. Those are floor vents to the left. Yeah, that's bad. And then if we look back to our right, we see a door with a V pattern indicating stairs, convection currents. Now, we walked in lazy firefighter scan. We didn't get down, number one. Look at the amount of heat coming up these stairs. 13 miles an hour in some of the studies in the Illinois or International Society of Fire Service Instructors found. Oops, what did we miss? Maybe we should start our scans low where victims are found. Maybe that's something we should institute. Should we go down these stairs without a hose line? No, but we're going to in the name of science. We are walking down an exhaust and absorbing energy, which is not a good idea. And then we finally see color. Is this the point when we should open the nozzle? Is when we see color on the tick? Within 1 meter or 3 feet of entering that door space upstairs, I began to feel heat. But what do you think I felt like by the time I made it to the bottom of the stairs? I was saturated. Your gear can only absorb so much energy. Despite what my truckie friends think, firefighter PPE or turnout gear does not put out fires. Engine companies do. Truckies save engine companies put out fires. So we have a healthy dysfunctional relationship. However, we need water to put on the heat and then work our way to the fire. This is just a simple analogy of what my friend Joe DeVito says, the yellow brick road. Follow the black, gray, white, yellow, orange, red. That gray and white part, though, is very tricky for most people because not all cameras show convection currents clearly, and not all environments will be easy to see. So some simple rules to remember thus far. Convection can tell you direction, but it can also tell you this level of severity based on the velocity and height. Colorization can provide information, certain areas that are hot that need to be cooled, areas that indicate where the fire is, hidden fires, heat sources. However, too much color can block out detail, hide convection, hide doorways, depending on the camera. But a simple thing to remember, because I like rhymes or ditties, as Corley Moore calls them, where colorization ends, convection begins as far as the detection in your eyesight. It's there, but as soon as that color trails off, you start to see that movement. And thermal layer height can point to see the fire. These are my friends in Columbus. This is a great demonstration of an open and moving hose line. The live burn cadre are 2 rooms away, looking perpendicular to the hallway as the fire attack team moves down the hallway. They got color in the adjacent room, convection blowing over their head, indicating which way the fire is. As they start flowing and moving, the color starts to shrink away or diminish. The convection starts to slow. The thermal layer starts to lift. They're 2 rooms away and conditions are getting better. But they could also use that data to follow that and find the fire if they were attacking from this way. Now, this takes training and practice to interpret it that quickly. But that's just one example of seeing the effects of fire attack through the eyes of a thermal imaging camera, knowing they were making a difference and progressing towards the fire. So let's look at convection currents. What do they look like? How do we identify them? First rule I must stress, height of convection currents. If it's up high, it is manageable if it's in a residential context. If you're looking at 9, 10, 12 feet ceilings, you could probably manage that. You're talking about Walmart, Home Depot, warehouse spaces that are 10 meters for my friends overseas, 30 feet or higher ceilings, and you have convection currents up high, that's not good. So speed and height can indicate severity. Proper identification can tell you where it is. Is it above you, below you? Is it to the left? Is it to the right? Why is that important? Because how many times have you, as a firefighter, don't answer this in the chat, stretched the line to the wrong place, had trouble finding the fire? The honest people in this webinar are probably shaking their head going, yep, I've had that problem. The rest of you are not being truthful, because at some point in your career, you're going to be frustrated by conditions and have trouble finding it. We're trying to give you the ability to find it based on these simple tips and tricks. And my good friend Kyle Rongus and I agree on this. We call it forcing a rebound. If we look, we have lots of color, and maybe we have some convection, maybe we don't, and we cool our entry space towards where we think the fire is by reading the smoke with our training in our eyes, And we flow 20 seconds or so and we shut down. The cameraman picks up the camera, wipes the lens and looks. Because we created a temperature differential, it will come back from the direction towards the source of the fire. And the greater the temperature difference, the faster the return. Look and see if you can tell me on this Seek Attack Pro which way the fire is coming from. Down the hall, around the corner. Joe DeVito's black, gray, white, yellow, orange, red. Right to it, fire's dead. You can clearly see the movement across the ceiling, moving from hot to cold, high pressure to low pressure for my science friends. And then in this case, we're looking down the stairs at Ohio Fire Academy. You can clearly see convection and colorization and a couple of hot hits. We shouldn't be standing down there, should we? But like I said, we do a lot of dumb things in the name of science. I'm not going to sit here and preach at you and tell you that we do everything right, because we've done many dumb things in training, okay? Let's look at this one about forcing a rebound. First, this is in our good friends in Dallas, Texas. We're looking down a hallway, and we have fire coming out of 2 rooms in this example. The majority of the fire is down the hall to the left. The image is going to gray out quickly because of moisture. You'll see one of our firefighters wipe the lens, and the image will clear up and see the color come back. That's one of the importance of things of TIC use. And what they're going to do here is briefly cool the ceiling, and you're going to see the effects of cooling, or more importantly, inadequate cooling. The colorization goes away, but the convection immediately returns, and you see more convection coming from that room to the left, indicating the majority of your fires to the left down the hall. You also see the thermal layers about 50% of the space, and we have movement passing us above our head. We don't want heat to pass us. We want to cool where we're at and cool where we're going. I'm not going to argue nozzles or hoses, but they need to be properly pumped, spec'd, flowed, and then they need to have a well-trained nozzle person on it. And more importantly, the 2 people behind them, if you have 2, should be managing kinks and moving line for you, so that it makes your job easier. But that second or third person back, if they have the TIC, they literally serve as a spotter, directing that person, making sure they stay on point, going directly to the fire. So let's look at an example of fast moving convection currents and ask yourself, what can we learn from this? This is in Kernersville, North Carolina, or excuse me, this is in Wilson, North Carolina, this video. Where's the heat going? What does the speed indicate? What does the height indicate? Let's look at it in TI basic first, which is your standard NFPA firefighting mode. Coming down the hall, turning the corner, and moving up the staircase. Oh, that's not good. We're looking at this in TI basic, and the Attack Pro shows colorization at 302 degrees beginning. Mixed gain mode does it pixel by pixel, so it's faster and earlier than most cameras. But what you'll see here is as we're watching this convection intensify, the thermal layer is descending. And then we try survey mode, which gives you more color down the hallway, less color where you're at, telling you the fire is definitely down there. So I'm not going to argue color palettes with you, but I will tell you it is a subjective thing. We recommend using what we call investigative color palettes early in the fire and late. In high heat scenarios, modes like survey mode or search and rescue mode in FLIR or size up mode in Argus or thermal throttle in Bullard should not be used in high heat environments, because you'll get so much colorization, it will overwhelm the end user and they'll not be able to see. Now, when we talk about convection, I need to stress this. Beware of unidirectional flow paths. You want to read about that? Look up DC Cherry Roads incident. Look up the San Francisco line of duty death and the Hillside fire. Look up anything that's happened recently where firefighters injured above the fire or on the side where the wind was blowing at them. Wind-driven events as low as 6 miles an hour have killed firefighters. Look up Mark Falkenhand's incident in Baltimore County, 2011. And then top of the stairs, if there's fire beneath you, the International Society of Fire Service Instructors basement fire study showed these flow paths in basement fires have been measured at the top of the stairs, 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit. For my friends overseas, that's 600 plus degrees Celsius. Now your mask is going to fail at half that. So, and they had 15 miles per hour of convection currents and smoke. If you don't open the nozzle, it's not if or when it's going to get you. I promise you. It's a matter of physics and calculations of absorption rate, TPP, what condition your gear is, how long you were in there, duration of exposure, and sheer grace of God and luck. And then operating above the fire for search operations, if the fire is knocked down, you're going to have to isolate, because you're operating above with not water in the fire. You are in the chimney. You're at the top of the chimney, what we just described. Another thing that gets us in trouble is window failure. Whether the fire takes the window or the firefighter takes the wrong window, as my friend John Davis says, that leads to disastrous effects which have taken firefighters' lives. These incidents have obviously ended tragically. There's been Maydays, there's been surprises or near misses. The sad thing I would say about, at least in the US, is there are more near misses than we'll ever admit because they're not documented. And to quote my friend Jimmy Davis, who's had more experience with line of duty deaths than anybody I know, he said this in Corley Moore's weekly scrap. He said, a near miss incident should be given the same depth and zeal of investigation as a line of duty death. Now, we're not there yet, obviously, but if we did that, like football players study, their plays, perhaps we would actually stop making the same mistakes that leads to line of duty deaths, and we would have more lives saved than lost. Think about that. Firefighter deaths, not that many, but it's still tragic. Civilian deaths, it's a lot. We could reduce both by identifying these conditions and going straight to the problem. And if you want to see what a unidirectional flow path looks like, this is one. I don't recommend doing this. We will leave out the details. Just know that there's a positive pressure fan involved here. There is a fire to your right, obviously, and positive pressure fan turns on now behind the fire. As you can see, this is not a good scenario. You can see blowing brands. I don't know what the speed is, but I can tell you that a 2.5 gallon water can, as you will see in this video, is not an effective measure for knocking back a 20 to 30 mile an hour fire. That is not going to work. And this rapidly overwhelms these firefighters and they have to back up and wait on a hose line. So you can assess this with a tick way before you get to this point and realize this is not going to work. Another example of a bidirectional flow path, which is what you see the majority of firefighters attacking the fire into, is an opening that shares the intake and exhaust. This is a recent incident we did with hen nozzles at WPCC in Morganton. You're going to see the two firefighters make entry, go straight ahead, turn right, and go down the hall to the fire. Pay special attention to the smoke and the tick view because we sync these up for your viewing pleasure. You can see smoke at about 50% of the opening, which is a bidirectional flow. Convection currents coming at you through the attack probe, moving to the right. They're flowing what's called a hen nozzle down this hallway. And you can see as he's flowing, there is convection currents, but they are slowing until he puts the nozzle down and convection currents return. We want to keep that area sealed off and keep that stream directed. And then he's going to turn left to the fire. And as soon as he does, the convection currents almost stop and go away. Now, a lot of gray and white on the screen because we're flowing a lot of water. So what should be done is wiping the lens a lot more. And this communication between the nozzleman and the tick operator has to be short with very little words being spoken because that's a lot of noise and they won't be able to hear you. But this was taken out relatively easy because of the skill of the nozzleman, direction, good water flow application. Can we do better? Always. But this is just an example of a bidirectional flow, what it looked like with actual furniture being burned in this research burn and the firefighters using technology, training, innovative tools such as that nozzle to put the fire out. Okay. Now, let's talk about the tricky one because I like to talk about the stuff that's difficult. Thermal layer identification. What the heck is a thermal layer anyway? It is the area between the superheated area, the hottest area, and the coldest area. That thermal layer, however, will show up differently based on the camera itself and the programming. This is an example in Dallas where we opened a door. We had very little convection. Fire had died down. But if you interpret this correctly, you can see there's a very white hot door to your right, and there's a line descending as we move forward, getting lower to the back of the building. Thermal layers tend to descend as they get closer to the heat source or if an area has been superheated for a while. As you get closer to the fire, you may see that line drop. The confusing part is most people don't pay attention to it because it's in gray and white. It's very difficult. You wiping your mask, a lot of noise, moisture, insulation, water flowing, very difficult. So let's look at an example of what this looks like through the attack probe. Doors open. Notice how shiny that doorknob is. That's one of the things we talk about in our training. There's a little bit of convection coming out of that door to the right if you pay special attention, because that's the remaining fire that was knocked down. This was a search evolution. You can see convection moving out that door, down the hallway, and that thermal layer is about 50% of the space. Now in this case, this camera shows color beginning at 302 degrees. Not saying this is not hot, but this is a relatively manageable space. He could close this door right here and basically end this problem. But this could be very difficult to locate without proper training and interpreting the language of heat. So when you look at this initially, when he first starts, that's why I said the initial scan is very important. That door to the right is the hottest portion of the field of view. Now we have to check every room, don't get me wrong, but we have convection coming out of that, and it's moving from hot to cold down that hallway, indicating this could be our fire's location. Now we trust but verify. Now, why is thermal layer identification tricky and also important? I have two examples for you here. It's a FLIR on the top, a bullet on the bottom, showing the exact same fire. Two rooms, the same room, two different ticks, two different interpretations. Why? Because despite what some people may say, a tick is not a tick. They're all programmed differently. They show colorization differently. They show convection currents differently. The background details within the color is shown differently in each one. And being able to identify this with your camera is extremely important. The camera on the top shows color beginning at 302 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius. The camera on the bottom shows color beginning at 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius. Big difference, but the one on the bottom actually has better grayscale for situational awareness, being able to see the detail. One on the top has more color indicating rapid fire development, which is also important for situational awareness. So which one's better? Well, it depends. And you as a trained firefighter is the difference. So grayscale can be deceiving, but it's extremely important, and colorization is important. In my opinion, until the world of firefighting agrees on a standardized color palette of when we should show color and improve details within color on all cameras, we're all going to be arguing about this particular subject for a while. Learn your tick and how to properly interpret thermal data sounds pretty straightforward. However, if your department has 5 different models and brands of cameras in one fire department, good luck. It's like having 5 different languages on the same fire ground. You put an MSA, Bullard, FLIR, Seek, and Draeger all in the same fire, you're going to see the fire 5 different ways. Make sure you learn your camera and try to stick with one brand or model or color palette, because that can really confuse and cause problems and misinterpretation and potentially injuries. Here's another picture of a non-1403 fire. It's an arson investigation fire showing the exact same cameras that you just saw, but you've got the GoPro view on the right where we see burning carpet, which is pretty obvious, but on the left looks dramatically different between those two cameras. Both are low sensitivity dual gain cameras. There's a green triangle showing up in the upper left hand corner, but if you are looking just for color on the one on the bottom, you're missing out. If you're looking for sheerly convection on the one on the top, you're going to see nothing but color in this case. Learning your camera when it shows color, what convection currents look like, and what the thermal layer looks like is extremely important. And you can't do that with non-live fire training, period. You have to do thermal in thermal imaging training. There has to be heat. When we're using artificial smoke, heated mannequins, this is why firefighters are having problems, okay? So let's look at that color argument. Colorization of what's known as apparent temperatures. Apparent temperatures, fun word, is an estimated value. It is a guess, and it can be hundreds of degrees off. So when does your tick show color? Let's go through them. FLIR shows color after 2% of the pixels hit 150 degrees Celsius or 302 degrees Fahrenheit, beginning with yellow and showing that in low sensitivity only. Bullard shows colorization beginning at 500 degrees Fahrenheit or 260 degrees Celsius after 3% of the pixels hit 230 degrees, and it switches to low sensitivity only. When you talk about someone like the older MSAs, they showed color twice, in high sensitivity at 290 degrees and low sensitivity at 1048 degrees. And then you go into the Seek camera. It shows colorization pixel by pixel beginning at 302 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's yellow, orange, red, just like the rest of them. So when does your tick show color? Do you know? You might want to learn that. And what does the absence of color mean? How does programming, manufacturer-specific stuff, distance, moisture is a big one, and angle affect that? So if I'm too far away, I got too much moisture on the lens, I'm at the wrong angle, I may not see color. So if you watch this video from my good friend Webb Marshall here, you can see color and you can also see convection. Remember I said where colorization ends, convection begins. You can see where the color is kind of fluctuating and the convection's moving past that. You can see yellow, orange, red, like Joe talks about, leading to the fire. If we turn and look back towards the door, you can see the convection's moving very fast here, and we can see the colorization inside the fire room, and we're seeing good detail on the firefighters as well. And if I pause it right here, I'll back it up just a little bit. You can see that thermal layer is just about right at his face. And that convection that's moving out that door is moving pretty good, and that's not a good place to put your face. Just saying, next time you do live burns, inspect your mask, because this type of behavior is what kills our mask, okay? So let's talk about those colors. We recommend these cheat sheets. You can get them from our good friend Sean Blocker at Max Fire Training, the Tick Guide. You can do these yourself. This is just one for the Attack Pro. Basically, it tells you when you see gray, when you see yellow, when you see orange, when you see red. But we have to also know that the absence of color doesn't mean it's the absence of heat. That gray and white moving stuff is hot. Depending on how far away we are, if it's heated up the surfaces or not, or my personal favorite, we float a lot of water down that hallway, we may not see color because we got atmospheric attenuation and we've cooled those surfaces. Convection comes back. It's going to be a little bit before those surfaces colorize again. So know your tick's color temperature correlation scale, or as I call it, the color cheat sheet. Know when it shows color. This is your basically your guide, your relative heat indicator, if you will, per NFPA, of what the situation's like. And this is what I want to caution you though. This camera reads an apparent temperature maximum dynamic range of 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. Does that mean that's how hot the fire is? Seeing how a single candle flame is 1400 degrees Celsius? No, it's much hotter than that. That's what it's calibrated to. So let's look at an example of fire attack through the Attack Pro, where we see convection coming over their head. We see colorization coming out of the doorway to the right. So we can quickly identify in zero visibility where to flow water and use the stream to see if we cool it and it comes back. And as we're cooling it, are we being effective? Is the colorization diminishing? Is convection slowing? Is the thermal layer lifting? Do we see an overall decrease in temperatures? And are we wiping the lens periodically? And please do not try to hold the tick up and look down the hallway as the person with the nozzle is moving. It's like driving in a blinding rainstorm with your windshield wipers off. It's not going to work well. You can see here, obviously, they are making good headway. So that's just one example. Now, many thermal imaging cameras, when I talked about your points we were learning, 7, 8, and 10, have what we call options or investigative modes, different application modes. Seek offers one called survey mode. FLIR offers one that I prefer called search and rescue mode. Bullard has a great one called thermal throttle. Those three are my personal favorites of helping you find the fire easier. Why? Because they colorize temperatures earlier at a lower point when you are remote from the fire, doing size up, low temperature situations, overhaul. As my friend Mike Chapman says, you can use it early in the incident or late. You want to see an interesting expression on a firefighter's face, turn on survey mode when you look into the fire room. It'll say, boom, lots of red. It'll block out any detail. Do that with search and rescue mode in the FLIR. Do it with Bullard's old one. You'll see a lot of blue with thermal throttle. You do it with Bullard's new one, it'll kick out and automatically go back to TI Basic. Has a nice little safety feature on it. By the way, for those of you who are paying attention, this is our survey mode webinar to help you use that. If you are using a 300 or Attack Pro, there's a cheat code. Press the green button and the black button simultaneously. You can click right through the application modes instead of pressing the flashlight button and holding it for 3 seconds. You see those two buttons there pretty clearly. This is survey mode's color temperature correlation or relative heat indicator. Notice it has a max temperature of 300 degrees Fahrenheit or 150 degrees Celsius for my friends overseas. That's important because if I go in a very hot environment, I'm going to see nothing but red. Old thermal imaging cameras, when they saw a lot of heat, would white out due to heat. New cameras haven't whited out due to heat in over 25 years. You will see a white screen because we failed to wipe the lens. The camera's switching between high and low sensitivity in certain models, or unfortunately, you may have cameras that were not installed properly, could have radio frequency interference that should not occur. You should see color, black, gray, or white. If you see all white, start with wiping the lens. This is our good friends in Germany at IFRT. It's a simple fire attack demonstration and kind of, I wouldn't call it a T-cell, it's been a modified one, but we see a thermal layer at 50%, grayscale rolling out the door. We're in TI Basic to start with. we're looking down through 2 hallways and we're going to turn right to the fire. This could be difficult for many firefighters to discern where the fire is. When we put it in survey mode, however, since we're far away, we'd say, look, yellow, orange, red. Maybe we should flow water on that, see what happens, and tell us which way it's coming back, because you can choose this, or you could choose survey mode in that case. And look, he opened the door and realized, oh, fire's back there. And we see more convection, more color, then fire attack begins in this particular evolution. Look at the convection currents moving pretty good. When he starts cooling, look, Europeans flowing water. It does happen. Look at this. And then when he stops, it comes back quickly. And we can see that yellow corner there telling it it's around the corner to the right. This is like playing hide and seek as a grown-up and winning every time. And the fire is trying to hide from you, and you're like, no, you're not. And this is my personal favorite video of showing you how to identify and locate a fire, because this one's tricky. We did this at FDIC. It's a Forge Fire Company container, if I remember correctly. You've got 3 containers, and directly in front of you, you have a wall that has the fire behind it. And to your left is a staircase, and behind that is the door leading to the fire room. Many of us would think the fire is coming from upstairs, and it could easily be misinterpreted by even well-trained TIC operators. If we cool this with our stream, we'd see the color go away, and we'd see the convection come back. In TI Basic, if you look here, the thermal layer is higher back towards where we are and starts to dip down as we move towards the fire ring. But black, gray, white is difficult to discern. Your camera uses up to 256 shades of grayscale, when the human eye can only see between 10 and 30, whether you're male or female. Whereas if we use different colors, or as in thermography, they call it isotherms, areas of interest that are colorized, we can identify where the problem is. But if it's too much color, go back to TI Basic. I use TI Basic for fire attack and search the majority of the time. If I can't find the fire, low heat, or size up scenarios, I use an investigative color palette, such as survey mode in this case, which is extremely beneficial, helping firefighters figure this out quickly without having to do a whole lot of button pressing, and they know exactly where it is. That's the goal with using an application mode or additional features, as we said in point 8 of that slide I showed you in the beginning. And you just have to ask yourself, which one of these 2 pictures is easiest for you to differentiate? Which one initiates a response? Which one in zero visibility is going to help you find the fire faster? Because that's what this whole point of this webinar is finding the fire. I want to ask yourself a question here. If the faster we find the fire and extinguish the fire, how much better is everything else going to get? How much property damage are we going to reduce? How many lives are we going to save? How many Maydays are we going to prevent or reduce by simply reducing our location and extinguishment time? Dennis Laguerre says extinguishment is 9/10 placement. I want to add to that. You got to place it in the right place. So if you're screaming, shout, flowing water all over the place in the wrong spot, it doesn't matter how many GPMs or liters per minute you're flowing if you're shooting your bullets in the wrong direction. We need to put water on the superheated areas, seal off areas where flow paths coming in, slow convection currents, and go straight to the fire with an open, moving, and flowing hand line. This is my favorite picture series done by JB Photo, Joey Baxa, one of our instructors. He's an amazing photographer, but pay no attention to my dirty hands in this photo. But the picture on the left, this is in Gilbert, Arizona, if I remember correctly. We're looking into an amazing Class A burn building in TI Basic. Grayscale giving you amazing detail of the burn building itself, the masonry, the ceiling, those super high temperature panels you see in really expensive burn buildings. Whereas in survey mode, we can clearly see color coming across the ceiling. Now I'm going to show you a disadvantage of survey mode here too. Notice what it did to the firefighters. It darkens them down. So the cooler areas can get dark blue. So I wouldn't use survey mode for searching for people. I use survey mode when I'm searching for heat. And that's what it's for. Low heat, remote from the fire, size up, awesome application mode for that. TI Basic is where you want to stay for high heat and searching for people. And those of you who are really interested in learning more, we've listed 4 webinars here for your reference. If you have a Fire Pro 300, there's a webinar there. If you have the Basic Attack Pro, there's another webinar. If you have the VRS, which is my personal favorite out of the Seek lineup that I use majority because it stands for Video, Record, and Survey. Well, as a trainer, I have to record. I have a GoPro mounted on top of the thing. So we sync the videos up in many cases. And then you had the, you had the Attack Pro Plus, which is your NFPA certified model. For those you have to use the NFPA certified. If you're interested in learning a lot more of what we talked about today and going further with your thermal engineering education, we provide more free resources than anybody else. The QR code on the left is Google Drive, which is tons of different resources, not just Seek, it's FLIR and Bullard and ARF and all kinds of stuff. The one in the middle is 25 hours of webinars. When we upload this one, it'll be 26 hours for Seek. And one on the right is our YouTube channel. That Google Drive on the left, if you scan that one, it should go straight to the presentation here. So you don't have to dig for it initially. So this presentation, you can download, you can share it, you can use it. We want you to learn from it. The videos are embedded in it. It's simple, it's easy. You got to do the work. Please don't email me and say, can you send me the QR code? It's in the presentation. Scan it with your phone, you'll go right to it. I'm just trying to make it easy. And if you need to contact us, questions, interested in learning more information or for training or anything at all, you can go to our website and hit contact us. You can email me there. That's my phone number. You can send me a text. Please be patient with me if I don't get back to you directly. I get about 1,000 emails a week. It's a lot of stuff to go through. I've got several people helping me. I've got an amazing cadre of over 20 instructors now. And thanks to Seek, we have a lot more technical support with things, and we're able to continue our education and helping firefighters by working with them in training, education, and developing products that help you become what we call intelligently aggressive. So if you have questions about that, you want to learn more about that, especially if you know anything about Seek related, reach out to us or reach out to Seek Thermal. Their website's thermal.com. And I'm sure Jordan has a few closing words to share with you, so I'll hand it back to her. Jordan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, guys, like Andy mentioned, if you have any further questions after this webinar, please feel free to reach out directly to Andy or myself here at Seek, and we would be happy to answer those questions. If there was something that was mentioned that you wanted to go back and reference, we will be sending out a recording of this webinar to everyone who registered a little bit later today. So thank you again, Andy, for your time, and thank you to everyone for registering for today's webinar.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.